Hello, and welcome to the Art of Teaching the Whole Child in a Pandemic, Cultivating Trauma-Sensitive Practices for Resilience. This is the second module where we'll be talking about cultivating predictability with intentional greetings. If you are here, you have been in December, you have chosen greetings as the strategy that you would like to target for your improving your habits that stick. So after week one, you've seen an overview of how we encounter pits regarding greetings and feedback, and you have selected greetings as your predictability strategy that you'd like to cultivate during the second week by identifying what the habit loop is for this. And then in the following weeks, we'll be monitoring that habit and talking together about how we can enhance that and build on that success. So you'll be right here developing that strategy. Just as a reminder, we are here under this COVID-19 pandemic and the unpredictability and disconnection that it has created. We are responding to the situation where predictability is harder to establish. A lot of the natural parts of the school day establish a level of predictability that we no longer have as much of as we're used to, and that's impacting our sense of stability as well as our students. And so good news is that research shows some small intentional greetings that we can use can promote predictable engagement for our students, whether we're in person, hybrid, or remote. So the objectives for this module is to learn some evidence-based greeting routines, to specify that new personalized greeting habit that you'll be using and keeping a pulse on how well you're using that in your wellness. So you're going to need about 20 minutes, some clear headspace, your printed or digital journal, which looks a little bit like this, so you can do steps 4 through 6. Just as a recap, we have every day, naturally, all of us have some feedback or greeting pits that we encounter. And so it's totally okay for us to be carving out, how do we want to navigate those pits and how do we want to improve those routines and habits that can help us navigate around those pits and pursue more peaks of connection and predictability with our students. So today you'll be watching these videos to see which strategy you would like to use. How would you like to apply your greeting habit? Just as a big picture question about, why would we talk about greetings? Why is this an important part of the day? When you think about the time that we are spending in class and the predictability of every day we have this available instructional time to us, but then ultimately, there's only some of it is scheduled for instruction, those academic periods. And then within this is the time that we spend teaching, and within that is the time that students are engaged and on task, and within that is when they're learning. And so this is, as you can imagine, you're not surprised that at the end of the day, about 38% of the day, we have the opportunity to have students academically engaged. And so it's really precious time that we want to maximize as much as possible. And if we can identify areas like their pits that we've talked about that are kind of lost instructional time through frequent redirections or students being disengaged, et cetera, we can improve moving towards more peaks in the day. And what research shows us is that there are two leading causes of lost instructional time, which are transitions and wait time. And when you think about both of those, these are significantly reduced when we have predictable routines, and that cuts down on the wait time and those transition times. So let's talk about what these can look like. So when we have our greeting pits of having frequent redirections and disengagement, students' videos off, getting crickets when we're asking questions, this disengagement can be countered by having one of two strategies of greeting students at the door or do now entry routines. Maybe you already have one of these in your tool belt and you want to add the other, or just we want to see new ways of applying this, but I'm excited to share with you first, greeting students at the door and how that can, what that can look like. Because what research shows us is that over the course of a day, in one day, classroom greetings can add about an extra hour of learning, an extra hour of that engaged time for our students. And so what this looks like in person is greeting each student by standing near the door and then verbally or non-verbally naming them as they come in and saying something positive to them and stating the expectations for what they do when they enter. What's their expected volume level? What materials do they need to get out? What do they need to do? How do they ask for help? Just some kind of setting the tone or expectations after we positively recognize them for walking in the door. And of course, in a virtual setting, we can do the same by positively acknowledging as many students by name as possible when they enter. So it can be as simple as, "Thanks for arriving on time, Tom. Hey, Joe, how are you?" or continuing a relationship like, hi Lisa, did you get to go to the beach this weekend? So following up on those connections that we're building, but doing this predictably when students enter, so they know when I enter, I know exactly what to expect. I'm going to be welcomed by name, and this is what we're going to do. So there's a few ways that we can do this, and I'd love to share these examples with you. The first is a younger grade, and the second is a older grade and virtual learning. And so let's take a look at these examples of the greetings in place.
Good morning, Ben.
So you can see these students have a choice of how they can be greeted when they enter, and they can choose that with the little visual board there. And yeah, some of these strategies, some of these welcome greetings, we can't use at the pandemic with the current protocols, but we can give some options that we do have. Like this teacher was able to make, put up the choices that she was comfortable with. And so there's a number of ways that we can still greet students, even with our current situation with the pandemic. So I'd like to also share with you another strategy that we can use for welcoming students into our virtual classrooms.
The video we're about to see of Denise is focusing on starting class. And I know this is an important area everybody is anxious about. So we're watching for things that we like and sharing in the chat what we notice.
Hey, Peyton's here. Hi, Peyton. Oh, and Camden's here too now. Hi, Cam. All right, do you all see my screen? So you will need paper and pencil or pen today, and definitely a positive attitude. So the 3 Ps, I'll give you folks a minute to get that if you don't already have it. So go, 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 and come on back.
Is number one, all of you have mentioned, or many of you have mentioned in the chat, just how welcoming and inviting Denise was. She called students by name. She was smiling. She was noticing students as they were hopping in and greeting them, and we loved that. We also loved how prepared Denise was. If we take a look at her screen, and if we were to roll back just a little bit, you see norms of those 3 Ps, which we thought were so great and so sticky. Thank you, Doug. Paper, pen and pencil, positive attitude. I need that every single day too.
All right, so you see she's greeting students by name when they enter the classroom, and then having some expectations set for how they enter and what they're expected to do. So great examples there. If you'd like to see more examples here, there's an 11th grade physics teacher who shakes every student's hand and says their name when they enter. Obviously it would be different in pandemic, but still a great technique, as well as a 5th grade classroom teacher who touches every student, uses their name, makes eye contact and smiles. So there's a number of ways you can click on these on YouTube to see them as more examples of how we can be greeting students at the door. All right, so we're going to move on to our second greeting habit that we can cultivate, which is a do now. And I think this teacher here does a great job of introducing the topic. So I'll go ahead and let him kick it off.
Okay, here we go. You're going to walk in the classroom quickly and quietly. I will hand you your do now. Instructions are on the board. Are there any questions before we get started? So a do now is any activity that you have at the very beginning of class that helps you to set the tone for that day. Quickly, quietly, get started right away. Go ahead and get started right away on your do now. Welcome, thank you. Kids come in and have something to do when they get to their desk. Okay, I got the back row working, and that something to do should go back to what they've worked on before and lead into what they're gonna work on next. Often it's really good to put the instructions for the do now up on the board, so you don't even have to say that much. They can just read them and start following the directions. And then instead of having to talk to a lot of kids, we can just say, I really like the way you got started. Now go ahead and work on number 2. And they read it, and then you can move on.
Yeah, and do it on the back of that.
Okay.
Is that cool? You know what to do, right?
Yeah.
I've seen teachers that do nows as quick quizzes at the beginning of every day. I've seen teachers that do a few old questions that they want to work on. You know, it could be a reading passage that the kids have been working on. Ideally, something that's going to lead you directly into that day's lesson. I see Chartenay starting to add to find the average of her numbers. The other great thing about a do now is it's really excellent technique for classroom management. I see the middle row is completely engaged in what they're working on. It helps you to set the expectations from the very beginning of your class period. Glenn is finished with his do now and he's working on. So a kid walks into your classroom, they know, I'm gonna walk in, I'm gonna get my stuff out, and there's work for me to do. Get to work, and I want complete sentences. No goofing around, do it for real. The hardest part of a teacher's day is constantly getting kids back on task, getting your students back doing the work you want them to do. That's the hard part. All right, you have about 2 minutes to finish your do now. Stay focused, stay on task. So the best thing about a do now is we start to work right away, and now I'm keeping you on task as opposed to getting you back on task. Are there any questions? Okay, back to work.
All right, that's a great example of how he's building that predictability right out of the gate, as he explained. And so some tips and tricks to using this is thinking about, before students entering the room, we have to identify that 3 to 5 minute independent task, presenting that visually. You saw him writing it on the board and putting out the materials at the students' chairs, or maybe handing it to them as they enter, and then displaying those expectations, like, what are the steps, what volume is expected, maybe what you do when you're done. You saw one student who had completed it and was already moving on to writing in a notebook of some kind. So a lot of those expectations we can put up visually. And then assess, like he was doing, by supervising, walking around the room, randomly calling on students, potentially somehow following through on the activity, so it doesn't feel like it's busy work that we as educators never check in on, but it's something that we are going to check in on as we proceed into the lesson. A good thing to think about is just starting small with a go-to approach to begin. He mentioned the idea of this transitions the students from prior learning into this new learning. You're not always going to have very unique activity that's going to do exactly that for the content you want to cover. So there's some ways that we can kind of carve out some routines to make this part of our routines and part of our habits without making it too complex. So start simple with a go-to. It might be something like check your work with the homework key. So maybe we keep our homework keys handy, and maybe we can grab that and use that as a do now, where we have the homework key copies available to students. So when they come in, they can pull out their homework, take a look at it, and compare their answers to the key. Or maybe you bring out a new homework or recycled homework pop quiz, like just to make sure we're maintaining some of those fluency with some of those skills that you're teaching, and you don't want to get dried up. And so this is, a pro tip here is don't think about it necessarily always building on previous and leading into the next, but sometimes it's just you can do either or in launching this lesson or building fluency from previous activities and skills that need to be revisited from time to time. Another option is activating knowledge with a KW of the KWL chart. So, what I know and what I want to know. If you want to get students started in thinking about a certain topic, maybe it'd be good to have a KWL chart handy to pass out to all the students at their desk, so that they can start thinking about, what do I know about this topic? What do I want to know about this topic before you get into thinking about what they will be learning, so that way they can activate their prior knowledge. And a pro tip here is that you can print this on a colored piece of paper. So maybe it's a unique color that you don't use too often, so you know where exactly it is when you need to grab it in a quick minute, or also for watching the students. So once you pass this out, once it's available to the students, you know who's got it out, who started on it, and who might be working on something else that they either shouldn't be, or maybe they've already moved on. So you can easily tell where students are at. And then you can always start with the end in mind. Think about, what is the essential question for the lesson. So if you have that, you can provide that as an open-ended question for students to answer as kind of a cold start to the lesson that you're going to be doing. There's also some examples that you could do that are non-instructional. Maybe you have younger students who need a movement break from time to time, particularly when we're coming back in from unstructured time, like lunch and recess and things like that, mask breaks, etc. So that movement break can kind of help ease them back into the classroom and the routine, but it's a predictable way that they know what to expect going in. You can get it started on your way down to the cafeteria before you leave your classroom to have it playing when you arrive back at the room or something like that. Maybe a what would you do question for probing a social emotional skill. So if you have like a character story, part of literacy instruction, and you want to see what their response would be to embed the social emotional learning into your instruction, you could start off with a question like this. I found this one by quickly Googling what would you do prompts. So while playing baseball near the school's parking lot after being warned not to, you accidentally break a car window and you don't know who the car belongs to. So what would you do? So these are good prompts. There was a good TV show that put a lot of people into these tricky scenarios where they have a complex social decision to make. And so this can be a good way to kind of get students conversation started and get their brains activated with a predictable way of entering that lesson. And then there's also the would you rather, which can be pretty fun for some students, of just asking simple questions, maybe build a relationship with them, get to know what their likes and dislikes, what their interests are. So good example here that I quickly grabbed off Google is, what would you rather spend a day without your phone or a day with no people at all? So there's fascinating ways that we can use this up. Maybe if you lead social skills instruction or other types of instruction, that these might be good tools as a kickoff to some of those lessons. But what about remote learning? Of course, you could use Google Forms with this nicely. So you could use your welcome slide and then have a go-to Google form that's, you might vary your prompts that you're asking. So maybe it's the essential question, or would you rather, or what would you do? So you vary the prompt that you're using as the do now. So when they enter the classroom, they see that prompt, but then they click on the same link. There's always the same form every time. That's just their name, the date, their answer. So you just have 3 things on that form. So it's the same form throughout. You don't have to have multiple links to juggle to get them to that form for their do now. So it kind of streamlines some of that process for you. And just remember that, when we're establishing expectations, clear is kind. So students are going to have questions when you get this started. So it might be, when do they do this? Do they go straight to their seat, get started? What do they do when they're done? What is their expected volume level? So having these expectations put down visually in your video call or up on the board, it can be a really powerful tool for making sure you don't get too many questions that kind of uh, diminish the predictability of this. And some of these you'll just learn along the way as you start to use it more often. So we have covered greeting students at the door and do now entry routines. So it's up to you, it's your choice. Which strategy would you like to use to cultivate more predictability in your instructional environment? So after you decided what strategy you want to use, maybe it's thinking about, what is the personal cue that you're going to use? What's going to remind you when exactly to use this so it can stick as a habit and become part of your daily or weekly grind here. So some examples that we have here I'd like to share with you is, maybe when you see the first student enter the room or the call, then you're going to start greeting each student by their name, and then just noticing that reward. You remember the habit loop that we've been building with our self-care habits, and now with these strategies of just noticing, I'm getting every student into a predictable groove, and they're each being seen. So that's a good reward to notice. Maybe it's, when period 2, those students leave your room, you're anticipating the next period coming in, going ahead and putting out those KWL charts for period 3 and displaying the topic and expectations on the screen early so that, you're providing that predictable routine within the day and you're redirecting less for period 3. They're coming straight into the classroom with something to do, like the video explained, and you're spending less time getting them back on task. And then another cue might be, you finish your lunch. And so now you're expecting students to start to return, or they're about to finish up their lunch. So maybe you start a Go Noodle video so that when you walk them back to class, that's already running to receive them. And then you can notice, you're providing that predictable routine within their day and you're redirecting less. You're getting them right into that classroom with some expectations set. So if you want more help with thinking about what are the cues and routines you might use, there's some more examples in your journal for you to take a look at to brainstorm what is it going to look like for you. So that in your next step, you just share what is your key takeaway from this video, and what is going to be your habit plan to stick with this new greeting habit. So in summary, identifying that personalized cue so that you can use an evidence-based trauma-sensitive greeting routine will cultivate more predictability in your classroom, and we can use our daily pulse to keep keep a track on that and kind of think about how that is a part of our routine as well, to keep noticing those rewards that we're experiencing, those peaks in the day. If you need help of any kind with navigating this, I would love for you to reach out to me, but I'm most excited to see what your habits are, what you'd like to stick with as your habit to build more predictable greetings routines into your classroom for cultivating that predictability that we all need. And I think it's pretty clear from some of the videos that I shared with you today that this predictability is not just important and well for the students, but builds our resilience as educators. So I look forward to hearing from you what your plans are for this.